So as this cursed thumbnail may suggest, it's time for the WFA Re-Draft from Season 3. There are some Hall of Famers in this class, there are some pretty huge busts in this class, but today we will be going back and showing you what could have happened with the help of hindsight and getting a full career out of most of these players. So let's just go right into the number 1 overall pick and see who the Flint Firebirds will be selecting this time. So sorry, past me. Future me here. I forgot that I wanted to mention some of the guys that just barely missed the cut of being in this redraft, since I'm not doing a second round of this one. But so here are some of the guys that are on the list. Prince Washington, a defensive back, played corner. He's played safety. He's done well at both. He's been an interception guy. He's been a tackle guy, depending on what the team needs him to do. Really great player. Look up his stats. It's really impressive. Jeffrey Macklin at wide receiver, a guy who's been on championship teams in the past and has looked good doing it. Dado Osakwe, just barely missing the cut at linebacker. Highkill Murray, same deal. And then, of course, one of the best kickers of all time, Jeffrey Davis out of Oregon State. So those are the guys that just barely missed out. You won't be seeing them in this draft. But let's go back to what past me was saying, and let's go to the number 1 overall pick. So in the original NGFL first round of the Season 3 draft, the Flint Firebirds selected Kingston Simpson, defensive tackle from Miami, at number 1 overall. This was originally thought of as a pretty decent selection, and he has been decent in the fact that he's been a decent role player. He's giving you 5 to 8 sacks a year, which is pretty good. But he is a little bit of a journeyman. He's been pushed around a little bit and definitely can't stand up to Nate Peterman Jr. At quarterback. Some would say he's the best of all time. Others say he's a product of a system. But he is the best player in this draft, so he's going to go number 1 overall to the Fury. So who knows what would have happened if this went about? It probably wouldn't have worked as well, but you never know. So maybe this is a whole other scenario, but we're going to put Nathan Peterman right here in Michigan. It seems like deja vu when we're once again replacing a wide receiver that the Omaha Marshals drafted in the top 5. They originally selected MJ Thomas, which is definitely a better pick than Shaquille Leonard was the year previously, but we're going to replace him with a wide receiver who I was surprised to find out is top 10 in receiving yards all time, Anthony Jackson, the wide receiver out of BYU. He originally went to the Cyclones, and he's had a couple of stints with a couple different teams, but he's really shown up statistically, and he's right up there with guys like Marquez Vick and Kevin Vance. So I think that getting Anthony Jackson and putting him on the Marshals makes them a better team for sure. So now we are up to the New Orleans Gamblers, and I get to show off all the work I did on that G. They originally took Jimmy Knight II, who is another decent starter. But we're going to replace him with an all-time great, and that is Simon Samuels at safety. Simon Samuels is a statistical tackling machine. He's number 6 all-time, only one behind Hall of Famer Darius Leonard II. Like, Simon Samuels, really great player, and he gets overlooked a lot, so we're going to give him his shine right here, put him in New Orleans, and just see how it goes. So number 4 is a no-brainer. Jake Blanchard is also going to be selected in the redraft and in the regular draft here by the Lightning of OKC. Jake Blanchard has done a really great job of turning his career around, and in the stats era, he's looked really dominant. So definitely look out for Jake Blanchard and the Boston Whales this season. And at number 5, the Tokyo Titans selected Nathan Peterman Jr. and somehow lucked into one of the greatest of all time, and then immediately threw it away for trading for Nick Molyneux. As a straight up, that is insane. How did they do that? We're going to replace him with a different quarterback since they can't draft Nate Peterman now. They're going to be selecting Julio Reyes. Julio Reyes, a guy who has won a championship in the past, a guy who, while he's not on the level of some of these other longtime starters, he is pretty solid. And while we could probably get them a better player, I don't really want to. So they're going to be stuck with a pretty great starter in Julio Reyes, to be fair. But obviously not as good as they could have had. But they'd probably just dump it away anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Next up, we have the Houston Toros, a team that didn't really get very far anytime. I believe they were 6-10 every year as a franchise somehow. We're going to replace Ryan Mack, as he's never been great, and we're going to go from a guy who went to Texas to someone that's even somehow more on the nose to go at this spot, Houston Tucker. Now, as I've gotten the defensive stats, it has come to my attention that Houston Tucker is actually third all-time in sacks in the stats era, to be fair. But, like, that's just insane to me. I didn't realize how good he was doing. So shout out to Houston Tucker. And we're going to move him up a little bit in this draft and put him right here, go to Houston, and have a really dominant career. And another draft mistake is the New Haven Lancers, who selected Larry Williams, who hasn't had a tackle since before Season 5. So yeah, very easy replacement. We're going to replace him with another guy that has the last name of Williams. This time it's DeAndre Williams, the defensive back from Clemson. He has played cornerback and safety, so he works in with the Lancers defense. He is a guy who is right now 14th all-time in interceptions, has done well on deflections as well. So he's not a guy to sleep on, and he's got a lot of talent. So look out for DeAndre Williams this season. And next up, we have the Indianapolis Cyclones, and we have them selecting Joel Woods III, running back out of Ashland. This is actually a pick that they made later in this draft, but with Anthony Jackson off the board, just makes sense. Slide up a guy who, the number 2 back in this class, 8th all-time in rushing, with just under 5,000 yards, a 3.8 average, and 42 touchdowns. A lot of people underestimate this guy, and he's actually really good. So Joel Woods coming right in here into this redraft, going to the team that originally drafted him, just a little bit higher. And now we move on to Honolulu and their selection of James Solomon Foster. Definitely didn't work out for them. So we're going to pick up somebody else that also surprised me with how good he's been playing as of recently. That's Charles Robinson, the defensive end. He's been a guy that's jumped around a little bit. He was on the Marshals for a while. He's number 5 all-time in sacks in the modern era with 33. He has 56 tackles for loss. So yeah, we're going to put him on the defensive line, really stack up this defense, just make it even better than it already was. They got to replace Houston Tucker's production as well. So slide him right in, make an impact. So next up we have the Sioux Falls Spirits. Took me a little bit to remember where they were from. And originally they selected Dada Osakwe, the linebacker from McGill University, who is a decent player. Like, if we did a second round of this, he'd be right in there, as I said before. He'd be right in the mix. He's not going to go in this spot. We're going to give them a future quarterback because their quarterback is, say it with me, Daniel Bryan. We always try to replace him every time we can. So they will be selecting Harrison Miller, who has had a career renaissance. As of late, he's been the Jamaica Hummingbirds starter for a while. That kind of came out of nowhere. And now he's moving on to the Corn Kings. We'll see how he does there. If he was able to start from the very beginning, then maybe his career would be thought of a little bit better. But we're going to send him to Sioux Falls and see if he can play alongside Richmond Webb, make this team into a dominant force. So the original Season 4 champion, Chicago Ghosts, they took Julio Reyes, and that is one of the reasons that they got there eventually. They aren't going to be able to take him in this draft, so let's build up this defense, give them Samuel Davis, a guy who is severely underrated. He is top 20 all-time in tackles, and he's actually number 16, so he's a lot closer to 15 than 20. He is a force that I often forget about, as well as you, so I'm mentioning him here, and he is a great player. Put him alongside Dave Willingham, make this defense just an insane defense, and see where it goes. And yeah, so put him right there, make this defense what it is. Coming up at pick 12, we have the Rapid City Falcons. Originally, they took Gideon Dooley, a wide receiver from a very long name of school, Texas A&M Kingsville. Small school guy that had a lot of hype and never really lived up to it. He just hasn't had enough opportunity after his original spot to really become something, and you can blame the Falcons organization for that. But we're going to replace him with MJ Thomas. So MJ Thomas sliding from the number 2 overall pick. He's still had a pretty decent career, and he's played on championship squads. He was with the Voodoo in their Season 5 championship. So he's a guy who knows how to win. He's a guy that has done a lot of good things in his career, so I think this is a pretty solid selection for the Falcons. Here I am once again changing another pick made by Jake Molyneux. In the original draft, he selected Eddie Lynch, who, at least in the stats world, hasn't done a ton. As far as interceptions and deflections, he hasn't been on the same level as some of the other guys in his class. So I'm going to give him Bo Bacon, a defensive player. He's a defensive back. He's played mostly for the Grizzlies. He has taken a couple other spots more recently, but he's a guy that is just better. He just does more things better than Eddie Lynch does, so it makes a lot of sense to slide him in here at this selection. So a guy that I thought I was going to be taking in the top 5 actually slides all the way down to 14 to the Spirits once again. They originally took Jackson Andrews. Don't need to spend much time on him. Didn't really do anything in the league. But the new selection is Mike Ripley, and Mike Ripley is a guy that has been a leader in sacks before, but his overall sack totals, especially the stats era, as you could say, hasn't been as good as the other guys that we've already mentioned. He's still pretty solid. He's number 13 all time in sacks, but with guys like Tucker and Robinson above him, it's hard to push him up a little higher. But yeah, 27 sacks since Season 5, 42 tackles for loss. That's pretty solid. As I said, that's top 15 all time, so you can't complain much. Put him right in there, make the Spirits good on offense and defense. And next up, we have the Renegades, who had a really solid season. They're coming off a championship berth, not a win. They were there, though. And I have them replacing some wide receiver talent. They originally selected Terrence Jenkins, a linebacker who spent some time in the ASFL and really never got his career on track. So I have them selecting instead Chandler Bloxham. Chandler Bloxham, who is a guy that has been the number 1 receiver in Detroit for a couple of seasons now. Really their main offensive weapon. Put him in the Renegades where he doesn't have to take all of the pressure. Put him alongside the Hall of Famer Travis Stafford. Make this look even easier for him. But yeah, so that's what I have for the Renegades here. Maybe they'd have a chance at beating me, but probably not. And so the reigning champions are up with the final pick. Last but not least, definitely not still hanging on to this glory. I selected Anders Vandermeer, the linebacker out of Eastern Washington, with the selection. He was okay. He never really got his footing. He was in and out of the ASFL as well. But in this redraft, I'm going to be selecting a guy that I selected in the second round of this draft, Nathan Molyneux, the defensive lineman from Michigan State. I originally drafted him just so I could trade him to Jake. So this time, I may hang on to him. He's top 30 all-time in sacks, which, isn't the greatest, but there's not a ton of amazing talent left over, so I'd rather have a guy that I know is going to have some pretty solid pass-rushing seasons, and his best seasons were before Season 5, so, Yeah, I'll take Nathan Molyneux as the last pick in the first round here. So that's it for the redraft. I hope you enjoyed watching it. A little flashback to one of the more exciting times in our league history, of course. So if you like this video, leave a like. We appreciate it. Leave a comment. Tell us who you would select in these spots. The draft is now less than a week away almost. So get excited for that. We'll get the final mock drafts coming in soon. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.